All right, so really quickly, I wanted to give a rundown about spondylolysis or spondylolisthesis, of which those are the same terms. It just depends on how you want to pronounce it, which is going to be that defect in the pars or the part of the spine that can lead to a fracture or have a fracture that is displaced or a stretch that's displaced that results in a slippage of that bone forward, of which is called the spondylolisthesis. Now, what does this mean to you as a patient? One is that if you have one, it can be either congenital or it can be acquired during physical activity or through repetitive physical activity. Once it's there, as an adult, it usually stays there. As a younger person who has not reached skeletal maturity, there is a chance of it healing. Now, the way that they've attacked this historically has been through a pathoanatomical approach. So the idea is that repetitive stress created that change, and therefore you need to get rid of that stress. So what they have done is brace the person, really restrict activity, or restrict activity to the point where they're not aggravating the region. And they've gotten good results. In fact, if we look at the overall recovery rate for younger people to get back to any type of sport is in the high 90%. If you look at that conservative rate of return to the pre-injury level of sport participation, it's in the high 80s. So really good chance of coming out on the high side with a conservative approach. In fact, when we look at a more recent review of comparisons between surgical and conservative, it tends to be better for the conservative approach. Now, the caveat is it's possible that those other individuals were worse off at the beginning and they might not have had a clear path to a better outcome, which is why they ended up having surgery. So there's some nuances to it. However, the chances are really good that you'll get back to it. It is anywhere between a 5-month to a 7-month process if you go by the research studies that have done this. Now, ultimately, if you're creating a pain in that region with a repetitive activity, you're likely putting the stress through there that can result in a continued irritation and maybe a lack of healing. However, if you're restricting the motion, you're trying to load the muscles of the spine, that should help out with taking load off of the bone and putting it on the muscles and help out with healing. Now let's talk worst case scenario. Worst case scenario is that it doesn't heal. And this is where things get interesting. There's 2 primary studies that looked at this. One was just to see if the prevalence rate of back pain was different for people who had a spondylolisthesis versus ones that had a normal back in a military population. What they found was the odds of developing back pain were the same whether you had a spondylolisthesis or you did not. The only difference was that if you did happen to develop back pain and you had a spondylolisthesis, you ended up having a little bit higher intensity level of that pain than somebody who did not. Now we'll branch that even further to a long-term study that was at last time point is about 30-year follow-up, and they found that the overall rate of back pain for people who have a spondylolisthesis is no different than the average population, which means that you're still at risk of back pain, but it's likely greater association to just being a human being as opposed to it being that specific anomaly. So what does this mean in general? One is it's not something to fear. 2 is that backing off, allowing it to calm down, building up the muscles around the area to take some of the load off of the spine is always a good thing. And I think long-term wise it'll be at a good point. So I know I tried to talk to you face-to-face with this, but it didn't really work out, so I figured I'd try this route. All right.